Okay, fantastic. Welcome everybody to another episode of Just Two Dads. I am Brian Altunian. I am co-host with my dear friend Sean Francis. And I think I say this every week. I'm so excited about today's episode, and I really am excited about today's episode. Our special guest today is it's going to be a phenomenal story. We'll introduce her in just a second, but just want to welcome everybody who's watching us live on Facebook Live, listening to us on podcasts, whether it's Spotify or Apple or Google, or maybe you're catching this at a later time on our YouTube channel or even on WSTX Radio down in the Virgin Islands. We're glad to have you here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating in this conversation. Sean and I are both just two dads of children who have been diagnosed with some special need. We talk all the time about the fact that we all have some element of special needs, but for us as dads, we feel that we represent a part of this family, the community that doesn't have a voice generally. And so we have been having ongoing conversations for several years, the two of us, and we decided to do this and share this with our community. And more importantly, to highlight those warriors, those people who are out there. We consider them to be part of our village, our expanding village of people who are servicing individuals and families in the special needs community. And today is another one of those. We're so pleased. And as it turns out, our village is expanding because our village is recommending other people in the village to come and be a part of our show. So we want a big shout out to Susanna Lavelle for being a guest on our show a couple of times, really a partner in some of the content that we're developing and introducing us to our guest today, Jessica Patay. But we're going to get there in a second. So I'm excited for it. So I'll stop talking. I want to say hello to Sean Francis, my partner in Thrive over here. How you doing today, Sean?
I am doing fantastic. Thankful, blessed, and very interesting dynamic, as I was sharing with both you and Jessica backstage, that I had our first IEP, individualized education plan for our son, Elijah. It's the first one that's been done virtually, and it's also the first one that's been done since he's become a student in high school. And it's a very interesting dynamic doing that just before jumping into doing this, but it just reminds me again how thankful I am to have this platform for us to be able to do this, to connect with people, back in the Virgin Islands where I'm from, people all around the world. And let's go ahead and get right into it and welcome Miss Jessica Patay.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Sean. I'm so happy to be here with you both. This is fantastic. It's the highlight of my week. Thank you for having me today.
Great. We feel the same way.
That's great. I hope it's the highlight. We'll see. I hope you feel the same way when we're done here, because
I'm sure I will.
Sean and I joke about it all the time. We're just again, I think we're still trying to figure this whole thing out. At the end of the day, I think that the one thing that ties us all together is our humanity and the things that we do with and for one another. And so we're thrilled to have you here, and so we're excited to be talking about you and the project that you're working on, and more importantly, share your story about your family and how you got to be a member of this special needs community. So should we start there? Why don't we start there and give people an idea of how you got to join this club that none of us have willingly volunteered to join?
Yes,
right.
That we are all.
Yes.
We're all dragged in.
Let's do that and tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you were leading up to that. Just because I always think that who we are at the time that we get our initiation into the club has a lot to do with how we receive it. So tell us a little bit about that and lead into how you turn that into a cause and everything.
Well, I was married to my husband, Chris, and we had already had one child, Luke, who was 2.5 at the time that my second son was born. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I had easy pregnancy and easy delivery, and then it all changed. Not what I expected, not what any of us thought. And even the first day, I didn't quite know what we were into, and nobody was really saying anything. My son Ryan was having some breathing issues. There were a few other things that day, but I didn't really know how seriously he was impacted until the next day when they started running all kinds of tests and scans, and told me that I would be discharged and he would be staying on the peds ward. And that's what was apparent at first was he was very sleepy and he didn't cry for food. In fact, when he was born and just came out naturally, normally, he barely cried. And I remember that stuck with me. I thought, oh, well, maybe I got an easy, quieter newborn. Luke got kicked out of the nursery at the hospital when I had him. So I thought, well, maybe I just had a mellower baby. But that stood out to me. Anyway, we spent a month in the hospital. We had an OT working with us who specialized in feeding because Ryan could not suck. He did not cry for food. They called it failure to thrive. They call it that when babies don't cry and wake up to eat, when they are not demanding milk or food. He didn't cry when he was wet. In fact, Ryan didn't cry his whole first year of life.
Wow.
So
wow.
He was born with low muscle tone, hypotonia. And with that, so many things are affected throughout the body. And there's 1,000 things that go into feeding that we take for granted when babies just latch on and suck or take a bottle easily. So we went home after about a month without any answers, still some tests out there. And he had a feeding tube. And we just were waiting. We were in that waiting period, but happy to go home. My son Luke was probably wondering where his mom was while I was in the hospital that month, and I tried to see him as much as I could, but I pretty much slept at the hospital for a month. And when Ryan was 5 weeks old, our pediatrician, who we love, called us and told us that he tested positive for a rare genetic disorder called Prader-Willi syndrome. Looks like Prader, we call it Prader. And my husband actually was the one who said, will you test Ryan for PWS? And 3 doctors said, he doesn't look like it. And my husband said, well, we don't have any answers. Let's do it anyway. It's a blood test. Nicely, of course. And so really, I credit Chris for finding the diagnosis and pushing for testing. And I'll never forget that night. I ran into my bedroom where Ryan was asleep in little red pajamas, and I scooped him up and I said, we will always take care of you. We will always take care of you. We will always take care of you. And I was in shock and sad, and just no mother, no parent, no father wants their child to be born with any struggles or any health issues or any special needs. And when you read about it, it's very scary and depressing. It encompasses so many things. And what makes the news is that in childhood, there is an insatiable food drive that kicks in, and it is life-threatening. So kids and adults with the syndrome need to be watched 24/7. And reading that online, you just can't even understand that. My baby won't cry for food, and then eventually he could be stealing food out of trash cans.
It's so it's so weird. Like it logically doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. That's amazing. Amazing. And when does it happen? Like, when does the transition occur? Like, how long does it vary per child?
It varies. Prader-Willi syndrome is a spectrum disorder. So the different features that are common to all look different in different kids and adults. And the insatiable food drive hits in childhood. For some, it's when they're toddlers, preschoolers. For Ryan, we say it was a slow burn. And so it was a slow increase over time. We did not have to lock our kitchen until he was 13. But a lot of families have to lock their kitchens way before 13.
Wow. So and is so prior to that, as an infant, when he started, because you said he wasn't really hungry, he wasn't eating. At what point did that change, and is it immediately solid foods? Is it formula? Like how does that occur? The transition.
So we right away were set up with an outpatient occupational therapist that specialized in feeding. We received that through our state agency, the regional center here in California. We immediately got plugged in and Ryan became a client. So an OT and a PT, physical therapist, started coming to our house. The OT specialized in feeding, so she just worked on Ryan's mouth, lips, cheeks, everything, and taught me exercises to do with him. And he had a feeding tube. So we would work on feeding by bottle, and then we supplemented whatever we needed to, which was a lot in the beginning, really a lot. Most of his milk came from the feeding tube, and it took him almost a year to get off the feeding tube and be able to take a bottle on his own. We started solids probably still at 6 months trying, but it took a year before he could take a bottle on his own and be strong enough and get what he needs.
Jessica, it sounds like it could or could not be, because it begins with something in your internal. Is it considered an eating disorder, or is it not? Because it seems like it could go either way.
Different people say different things. I don't call it an eating disorder, even though it's compulsive for sure, and left to themselves, they would compulsively overeat to a dangerous place.
Right.
It is not something that kids or adults will ever be able to regulate, no matter how good a job Chris and I do trying to teach. They cannot help themselves. It is a compulsion. It is an obsession. And we have always provided food security is a term that we use in the PWS world. We've always stuck to a schedule. We've never said, oh, Ryan, we're going to be in the car after your doctor appointment, so we'll just have to skip snack today. Never in his life. And he's 17 and a half. Never missed a meal, always plan ahead. And we usually don't give outside of that schedule, because it actually increases his anxiety, because it gives him hope that he will have access to more food. So we stick to the schedule. And one thing that is a double whammy in Prader-Willi syndrome is that they are hungry all the time and they have to be on a restricted diet, because they gain weight so easily.
So metabolism is traditionally very slow then.
It's slower, and they have less muscle tone. And so muscle, burns calories. And so a lot of kids and adults are on a very low calorie diet to prevent obesity from happening. Ryan is very skinny and tall. He's 6 feet tall now. We don't count calories, but we're careful.
Wow. So what do you attribute his? Is it just genetics? What do you attribute his? Because that's my first question. Is is he now dealing with issues with regard to weight and things of that sort? But it sounds like he's not. You said he's tall and skinny. What do you attribute that? And don't be afraid to take credit if it's because of the work that you guys have put in.
I don't know. I say I can't take credit. I mean, I'm careful. We don't give seconds. I stick to things. We stick to things. We don't reward with food. We don't say, I'll give you this if you stop your meltdown. We've never done that. You cannot do that.
That's tough.
Yes.
That's
because
very,
in
very
the special
tough.
needs world, you reward with gum, candy, a treat, right?
Right. And even if it's healthy, even if it's a healthy
even
food,
if it's healthy, yes.
Yeah, but in your case,
Apple.
the mentality that's adopted or absorbed with reward, a reward of food for good behavior, is dangerous and can be lethal, even if it's, again, like you said, even if it's healthy. So there, give yourself credit, because that is not easy. I already know that's not easy. So take the credit. Take the credit.
Thank you. Food is like air. to a child or adult with Prader-Willi syndrome. So if you put it out as a reward,
Mm-hmm.
their anxiety goes way up because they desperately want that reward and they have to work for it. So and then it becomes law in their mind that their reinforcer should always be food, gum, candy, something.
Right,
So
right.
we just have never done that. So going back to the beginning, because he was born with hypotonia, all the milestones are delayed. He didn't walk till he was 3, which is actually kind of late for Prader-Willi syndrome, but it is a spectrum. Yes, we had speech therapy started at age 1. He still gets speech therapy a little bit, and he still gets a little bit of OT, not really during distance learning. And we stopped PT probably by 8th grade. We stretched it out as long as we could.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about milestones in the early years. And then the food drive hits. And then there are behaviors and a lot of anxiety.
What caused you guys to stop the physical therapy at, did you say 8th grade?
Well, we stopped it through the school district. We haven't done it privately in quite some time because he's fully safe, at school. It really doesn't call for any more physical therapy at school. He's walking, he's running, he's very active. He really doesn't. I mean, he would benefit, of course, if we were to do it privately, but it's not
Right.
really necessary for him to
Necessary.
navigate his school day.
Okay, I see that. Take credit for that too, because again, you're deciding it's not necessary for him to navigate his school day. If it was, you would take the inconvenience or whatever comes with it in order to do that. So that's the one thing that applies to any special needs parent at all, is you're always thinking about, okay, what's in their best interest, what's easiest for me, but not what's easiest for me, what's best for them, regardless of whether or not it's easier for me. And that's not always an easy thing to do. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, and I want to add to that too. We have other kids. And so, and because you have a child with special needs, there's so much time and attention, obviously, that gets placed on them that is very overt, very obvious. And even when you try to be intentional, and we splinter up as a family a lot so that we can meet the needs of our other kids. Luke is 20, Kate is 15. And I just wasn't willing to sacrifice everything and do all these private therapies for Ryan and run him around town and never have time with my other kids.
We did an entire episode on that, and which is a whole other subject, and we could do another show on it again, which is how do you love your kids equally but different? Because that is a challenge. We have neurotypical kids as well.
Yes. So, I mean, we went through seasons of some private therapies in the early years, but it wasn't something that we felt we absolutely had to do that would make the hugest difference in his life. Yes, he'll always benefit from additional therapies, but is it going to help him get his high school diploma? No. Is it going to help him be independent? No.
Right.
You just have to weigh, what's best for your family and also what's best for your own mental health as a parent. If you're running yourself ragged between your neurotypical kids and your child with special needs, and you don't have any margin for taking care of yourself, taking care of your marriage, taking care of your friendships, because you've overscheduled every single kid, that's not going to serve you in the long run.
Right.
And so we have to really be careful about that.
Those were all the questions I was, for sure. Those were all the questions I was gonna ask you. Like, how do your other 2 children deal with it? But it also sounds like early on, it was almost like it's 24/7 care. And how do you and your husband Chris, like, how did you guys juggle that and stay sane? And I'm just being honest. My first marriage didn't survive for a whole bunch of reasons, but the stress of having a special needs child obviously has an impact on the relationship. So how did that work out for the 2 of you, and actually for your children as well?
Thank you. Chris and I have now been married almost 24 years. It'll be 24 years in April. which I can't believe that because I still feel like I'm 25. So how did that happen?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
But
Me too.
he he was very involved from the beginning. He never said, "You're a stay-at-home mom. I work. You take care of Ryan. I'll go to work." And he's an attorney, has a very demanding job, but he made it to every IEP, made it to every specialist visit the first year, and there was a ton. And he never made me feel like I was on my own to handle Ryan and Prader-Willi syndrome. So I am so grateful that he has always been completely a partner with me in managing everything that comes our way as a family. So lots of credit to Chris.
Does he work for him? Does Chris work for himself? Or does he have a business or does he have a job?
He works for a law firm in downtown Los Angeles. Certainly right now he's working at home, which is nice. He doesn't have to do the commute.
That's good. Good. That's great. And we don't have to mention the firm's name, but I just think there's something to be recognized for. Usually there's only 2 instances where that happens and someone has the autonomy to do that. Let's say 3. The one we're in now, which is unprecedented, which most people have adjusted to, most jobs or companies. The other is if you're working for yourself. And the third, which is the rarest, is that in any situation, you have an employer who's simply flexible with you and allows you to do those things. And so that's fantastic to know that has occurred. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I would say too, when it was necessary or we felt like we needed just to check in, we went to couples therapy because we were dealing with so much high stress, and we went through a series of hits for many years, and you just think it's never gonna end. So we were living in survival mode for, it felt like almost 10 years. We both lost our mothers to lung cancer.
I'm sorry.
My mom in 2004, and then less than 6 months later, his mom was diagnosed with lung cancer, and we lost her in 2008. And there just was a lot of crisis and loss that we dealt with in a very short amount of time. And we were glued together. Now, I'm not saying put our marriage on a pedestal. We disagree. We fight. We have our issues. I have my own issues. We're always learning to communicate better with our kids and with each other still. But we've worked at it, and we've, it's hard for us to get away for a trip. That's kind of not really doable, but we'll take 24 hours a couple times a year, even if it's a hotel 10 minutes away, and we'll get that time together. And we've always made social time with other couples a priority, and dates a priority.
You gotta have that. Let me ask you this: how did you deal with because how much of this one has depends on the person, but it is inherent as a special needs parent at some point. So I'm wondering how you dealt with it individually as well as together, and that is the idea of any kind of blame. In other words, when you ask why me, or what did I do, what's part of my history that causes this to take place, how did you guys work through that individually or together? Because I know that that's part of the reason why in some cases marriages may not survive, or even just a single parent altogether. There's just so much where did I go wrong, because we're willing to take responsibility for any and everything with our children's success. So it's very natural to do that. How did that play out for you?
To be honest, we in the beginning, we didn't ask why and why me.
Good.
I think we have a strong faith, and I understand that we live in a world where everything doesn't go as you want. And even if you're good people, A plus B doesn't always equal C. So I didn't ask that in the beginning. I think I was definitely grieving and in shock, but then wanting to learn everything, do everything I could for Ryan. And I really didn't stop to fall into despair. I knew I had choices. I knew I had choices where I could get stuck in that, or I could just try to accept it at the place that we were. I think that's not one and done. Grieving is not one and done. And it was definitely years later that I got angry. that I asked the questions. And so I did my own therapy because I needed some place to go to because I was angry how it affected our whole life. It affected the other kids. I just was grieving. And again, I should say, because what I like to say, or what I say, is that grief in special needs motherhood is not linear, but it's cyclical. It comes and it goes, and it comes and it goes. And I think when the wave, is what I would call it, would come, then I would make sure I was talking about it and talk with Chris, talk with a therapist, talk with a best friend, whoever, a mentor, to talk through that pain.
First of all, I'm just, so far, I'm gonna take some credit. Neither Sean or I have burst into tears, although a couple of times I think you had me pretty close. But for what you've been through, did you have a support group that you were? I know you had girlfriends, you said, or friends that you would talk to. But was there a support group for you at the time? Is there a Prader-Willi's group of parents?
Yes, I want to go back to the beginning too, because as soon as Ryan was diagnosed, we contacted the national organization, Prader-Willi Syndrome Association in Florida, and they connected us with the Prader-Willi California Foundation. So thankfully, in our state, we had this foundation with resources and support groups. And literally within a few days of Ryan's diagnosis, we got a phone call because Chris had already made the call to the national organization. We got a call from Lisa Graziano, who was the executive director there and was for 15 years. And she said, "Hi, I'm Lisa, and I'm going to be your mentor mom."
Oh, wow.
I call it the Lisa phone call. It gets me choked up. 17 and a half years later. And she said, "You're not alone."
That's awesome.
And then I found out
he
she lived 15 minutes away. So I had somebody in my community who I could go to. Her son was 4 or 5 years older than Ryan, so she was ahead of me on the journey, and she knew so much, and I had somebody I could go to.
Wow. When you spoke of grief,
I love that.
I know that there's I know that there's a grief that comes with diagnosis, period. And so what we do is we're grieving the loss of the child that doesn't exist.
Yes.
Which is the child that we wanted our child to be, that we hoped, right? That's what it typically is. But I know that one of the things that the planet lacks is being childlike as opposed to childish, which means trying to step into other people's shoes. So in that sense, rather than assume that that's the grief that you're talking about, I want to try and get into your shoes by asking, is that the type of grief that you're referring to?
I think it was, so I call myself a recovering perfectionist, and because of my own family background, I think I went into marriage and motherhood with really high ideals. I had big dreams for what I was going to create with Chris, which was not going to be my growing up experience. I'm not saying it was terrible, but I was going to be different than my parents were. And so then when your child is diagnosed with a very serious disability, lifelong, he will need to be watched 24/7 for his entire life.
Right.
I grieved what his life was going to be, what I thought it was going to be. Of course, I grieved what his struggles were and would be. I grieved what it was going to do to family life, how it was going to affect Luke. And then we went on to have Kate, and certainly that grief for that specific grief about how it affects the family hits again and again. So, and I think I was just sad that it wasn't going to be this nice little perfect family that I was trying to create. But I say that, or I should say, and yet the gifts of special needs parenting, or the experience, is that we get to shift in perspective, in priorities, and purpose.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned, and how much of it, if any of it, you care to divulge or share is completely up to you.
Mm-hmm.
But your experience with regard to your parents, I don't know if you meant the way, if you were referring to their marriage or just their parenting or both, but your experience with that, as appreciative as you were, is obviously something that you wanted to improve upon as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think, if at all, that has affected you in a positive sense with
Mm-hmm.
regard to who you are now as not only the parent that you are now versus your son's diagnosis, but the parent and person that you are now with regard to your stewardship of the soul, if I will, as
Mm-hmm.
in terms of creating your organization and everything? How do those play a role?
Okay, which part do I answer first?
Up to you.
It was a multi. It was like 22 questions.
That's like 3
Yeah.
questions or 7 questions in one, Sean.
Trust me, that's the low version. I usually have more than that going on at the same time. Sorry.
So I may not remember. Sorry. I may not remember.
Okay.
I'll do my best. I think I just wanted to be more involved with my children and intentional with my children than maybe I saw in my own parents. My parents divorced when I was very young, and so I didn't grow up with a dad in the house, even though my dad did his best to see us. We weren't across the country or anything like that from each other. We did see him every other weekend until some point in our teen years where we really wanted to be with our friends. So my dad made the effort, but he just wasn't really involved and didn't really know me deeply. And I wanted to know my children deeply. And how it's affected my parenting, I would say, I would love to say it's all good. I would love to say I'm so amazing because of this. I definitely think I'm a better human being because of Ryan. I think our whole family is more sensitive to others in crisis. I think it's grown our compassion. But one thing I find myself always apologizing for is I'm tense at home. I'm way more fun, I feel like, outside the home, or I can laugh easier, or I'm witty with my girlfriends. But I walk in the house and I still carry attention because with Ryan's anxiety, you just never know.
Never know. You never know.
And
Yeah.
so I'm not as fun. I'm not the fun mom that I thought I would be. There are things I don't do as a mom that I thought I would, that I just don't have the energy for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's times when we're out and about, and it's like anybody else when you come home. I'm a real homebody. I just love to come home, generally speaking. But there's times where, sometimes it might be because there's a meltdown. It might be just because of something. I happen to just, coming home is like, as you come in the door, you're relieved, depending on what that's like. So that much I can relate to. So this is the perfect point to sort of then transition into telling us about your organization.
I want to ask one.
Go ahead,
Brian.
One
question about Chris, because I definitely want to talk about We Are Brave Together for sure. But just
Okay.
one question about Chris, because this is, it was just, as just two dads, theme for us. I'm fascinated by this and jealous, and honestly, I think it's amazing. And I think that as you were describing the emotions and the feelings that you were going through as a mom, I think special needs dads, we probably go through some of that stuff and then are angry and then feel guilty about feeling a certain way. And, the blame fest, generally the fingers point in most of the time. Can you, and he's not here, and I'm asking you obviously just through, your experience, but I'm sure that he went through a range of emotions as well. And did he have a support group? Did he have a place to go to have a conversation? Because it's vulnerability
That's a
for
great
men
question.
is hard to show and something that we don't often do. So just curious if you
That's-
just talk about that. If you could.
And there aren't enough support for dads, which we'll talk about We Are Brave in a little while, because we are launching, we launched that a dad's support group. But we jumped into the support group through the Prader-Willi California Foundation. We met couples that we really connected with. And so we would do dinners out without the kids. Most of our get-togethers through the years have not been with the kids because of the food piece. But we made these really nice friendships with other parents. So as couples, we would spend time together, and Chris would gain that support. Once in a while, the dads might get together, but the moms would always get together a couple times a year and have dinner and swap stories. But Chris definitely has gone through his own grieving, for sure. And he has good guys in his life, and he just is he's steady. He's just steady, stable, and just has really good perspective. And so there was no ego that got in the way, pride that got in the way. How could this happen with my son? I'm sure there was grief about what he wasn't going to experience with Ryan as a dad, and grief about what the kids would and wouldn't experience with Ryan as their brother, for sure. I mean, even still to this day, we grieve how it affects our kids.
Have any of the kids ever been vocal in their disappointment or in terms of attention that they miss out on?
They, at different times, for so many years, I was worried that they were going to grow up so resentful and angry.
Right.
And they didn't so far. They didn't.
Good.
But yes, they've shared that it's stressful living in our house. There's definitely been trauma for them growing up in our story. And they love Ryan so much. They are fierce cheerleaders. And I've given them permission to say whatever they want to say. I can say, kind of sucks some days. Kind of sucks that we don't do family trips all together anymore, doesn't it? Like, I just put it out there. And just so that they know they can say whatever they want to say. Do they always say it? No. Do they keep it inside? Yes.
Right.
But I'm sure more will come out as they grow into adulthood.
Right. We've never heard it at home, but we always try to keep that door open too. Everybody's always like, no, we get it. We understand. We're like, well, you have to understand that you're not loved any less. It's different because of the attention that's needed. But and that's a battle that will that never changes. So tell us about We Are Brave, how it came to be, because for any of us that take this and make it into a cause, for a lot of us right now, especially those of us that work a 9 to 5 and everything, we did a show on business, special needs in business, taking your tools and your gift and your challenge and turning that into a mission, a drive, or a business where you're impacting other people, and it allows you to live a life that you can build. Tell us about how that got started, and then lead into what it is, what you do, and how, and be sure to please share Chris's involvement with that too, how that works.
Sure. So I have always sought out community, and growing up, my girlfriends were my life. They're still my life. They're my family. I've had such deep, wonderful friendships, and we created community within the Prader-Willi syndrome world. We created community within our school district when Ryan entered in and was in special needs classes and receiving therapies and services. We met families that have helped us navigate this road. And Chris and I are both social bugs, social people just by nature. And I also had the benefit of some mentoring along the way. And so I wanted that for other moms. I know how isolating this journey is. I know it's exhausting and it's beautiful and it's hard.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful and it's hard. And I have always been very honest. I started blogging in 2012 and just sharing openly and honestly, just everything. And I received a lot of feedback, positive feedback. Thank you for saying how I feel. Thank you for shedding light on what our life is like that people don't know about or don't understand. And so I think doing that gave me a voice, made me feel like I had a voice. And I wanted other moms to benefit from connection and community and not feel alone. So I like to say that We Are Brave was born out of a collision in my heart of my passion for the friendship of women and community and my heart for special needs families, knowing what they go through. And so I just had this big dream and thought of the name with one of my best friends. We thought of it together. And we had been doing, a little background, we had been doing these fluffy girlfriends retreats that we started doing in 2012, my best friend Kimberly and I. And it was fun. We traveled to different parts and organized these intimate retreats with our friends and friends of friends. And then we thought, well, where could we really meet a need? Well, who needs a break more than special needs moms, right? And all the frontline workers at this point, can we say? But so we said, let's do something for special needs moms or moms caring for children with any and all diagnoses. And so I went on with the support of my amazing husband and his funding to launch We Are Brave Together in July of 2017. And that year I had gathered about 125 names on a list of moms who are interested. And we launched. We didn't have a website. We had a logo. I had a business card. And we didn't have our nonprofit status, but we launched. I just had to do something. And so we launched offering retreats and support groups. And we launched with a big summer party, and we probably had 60 moms show up to my house. And we crammed in the backyard, and we shared the vision and the heart of We Are Brave Together. And people just started pouring in. And then we finally got our website going. We got our nonprofit status. Chris kept us going until we had our nonprofit status and we could fundraise. And so I credit him and I credit Ryan. There would be no We Are Brave Together if there were no Ryan and there weren't all the experiences that we had along the way. So fast forward, now we have 1,130 plus moms nationwide, actually worldwide, because we do have some moms from outside the United States that are also a part of We Are Brave Together. And we offer support groups, workshops, and retreats. It's all virtual right now. Thank you, pandemic. But we pivoted like everybody else. And then we also were able to launch a podcast in the middle of this last year. And so it's called Brave Together. You can find it on iTunes and Spotify. And again, it's just to further our mission to inspire, empower, educate moms, help them feel like they're not alone, provide community. So it's been a journey.
Wow.
It's been amazing.
When did it launch? When did you actually start it?
We started July 2017. So it's been 3.5 years.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
the kinds of activities, I think I saw you guys you were doing a run together, I think. Did I see that on social media somewhere? Or
yes, we did for a fundraiser. We did a virtual race. So whoever was local could join in, or you would do it wherever you are. Susanna Lavelle was a participant, and she did her 10K where she is. And we had other people in other parts of California or parts of the country that signed up to be a member of the virtual race team, and they would fundraise. And it was a huge success.
Wow.
So we had people walking half marathons. We had people walking and running 5Ks and 10Ks. and it was a great experience. And our goal was 10,000 and we raised over 13,000 for We Are
Wow,
Brave
that's
Together.
fantastic.
So it was a really
Fantastic.
wonderful fundraiser. I think we'll do it again this year.
Wow. That's great. That's so prior to the pandemic, how many events would you say that you guys probably did per year?
Well, we were doing support groups every other month in the area where I live, in the South Bay area. And then we would do pop-up support groups in other cities when moms requested it. So in Los Angeles, several in Orange County, San Diego. And so we would do 6 to 10 support groups a year in person.
Mm-hmm.
And we were building on that and before the pandemic. And then we actually started launching satellite support groups as well. So we launched our very first one, San Diego, right before everything shut down. And since then, we've launched a bunch more. So we have a support group in Arizona, Utah, we've Los Angeles, we have Florida, and we have, I'm blanking, Tennessee. And then we just launched Kansas this month.
Wow.
So, and I hope I didn't forget anybody. Utah. So we have several satellite support groups and we have more on the horizon as well. And it just requires a mom who wants to be a facilitator, and it's all over Zoom right now. But when restrictions lift nationwide, then it will be Zoom and in person.
Hopefully after today's show, you'll have considerable growth in terms of those that join and attend. And let me ask you this: when you guys do your events, are they primarily social, or do you have any therapists or anything like that that are that offer their time and services for your gatherings or any kind of event?
Yes, absolutely. We will have therapists and life coaches speak at support groups or workshops. We do an annual Preventing Compassion Fatigue workshop every February, and we'll do our 4th next month. And we have a couple life coaches speaking. Yes, we have a whole list of wonderful resources and speakers that we bring to our events and retreats.
Is that what it sounds like? Compassion fatigue, just getting worn out, caring about other people and neglecting care of yourself in the process?
It's an actual term. I'm blanking on his name, out of Tulane University, came up with this term, compassion fatigue syndrome.
Yeah.
And it's, a nice way of saying caregiver burnout. It's ascribed to caregivers. They don't necessarily say special needs parents, but yes,
we know.
It's us. We know.
Yeah.
Nurses, therapists, those who work with animals. So they probably also put in spouses who are caregivers as well.
Right.
And it's a real thing. If you don't take care of yourself, you are going to burn out. So we talk about self-care a lot, and I know people roll their eyes at that word. Our podcast episodes this month are about that, different twists on it. So I hope people are inspired to take care of themselves, take care of their souls, take care of their hearts, take care of their bodies.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because that's just another example of how strange human beings are. We're at the top of the food chain, but we're the strangest beings on the planet, because that shouldn't seem weird. If we're both, drowning, and the strength of the ability to swim is something that I don't have and you don't either, how can I help you from a place of weakness? It just, it's the self-care aspect is something that is important, and it's real, and it's also very, very easy to neglect.
It really is. It really is. This last several months have been very stressful and full of needs in the family. And I could see how you could abandon taking care of yourself, because I feel very stretched in my time in a way that I haven't ever experienced, more than ever. And I'm still getting up twice a week to run with my running buddies because I have to sweat my stress out. But there are days when I don't want to get up in the dark and I don't feel like it. but I just make myself because I know I feel better afterwards.
After. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very much the same way with my morning workouts. And yeah, when you do that, there was one day I went and, and you go out for the walk and I'm like, I didn't expect the wind to hit that hard this morning. It's actually kind of cold. And I'm literally at the fence between turning around and walking back into the house and getting on a stationary bike, or keeping the promise I made to myself and going. So that's a tip for anybody listening, which is there is immeasurable value in making and keeping promises to ourselves. Sorry, Brian, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say I'm glad to hear that you're building up a support group for the men in these conversations, because again I think the thing that Sean and I have seen more than anything is that we feel I'm not speaking for my entire gender, but I think we feel guilty about things like self-care when we're trying to take care of other people. We feel it's these kinds of ideas and speak to, I think in certain cultures, speaks to weakness, or speaks to a lack of machismo or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that nothing makes you stronger and have a better foundation than making sure that foundation is taken care of. I mean, you can only build a building as high as the depth and strength of the foundation. So I love that you're doing that. I think that's
well, and I always say, I know it sounds audacious, but you as the caregivers are the most important people in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's when
forget that.
Yeah. Well,
you forget that.
I think I ended up sharing on social media because I had heard at some place, a special needs parent, especially when we were talking about when the pandemic hit and we were referring to essential workers, and you were referring to people in supermarkets and doctors and nurses and people at hospitals and everything, are as essential as it gets. But make no mistake about it, a special needs parent, especially in the midst of a pandemic, is an essential worker. I mean, as much as it could possibly be. And for myself, it's interesting because when you think of self-care, I suppose there's always more that I could use, but when it comes to the self-care, I think of my wife's self-care being neglected. And more importantly, because I like to think about, I try to put my energy on what I can control, is I try and think of like, how much of that do I get in the way of versus contribute to? And that's a work in progress. That's just, just being the truth, it really is, and when we ask ourselves, how do we not feel guilty about caring for ourselves? And Robert mentioned that, he knows someone that is, if someone is depending on, on us, how do we not do that? I would say, and Jessica, both you and Brian can tell me if you chime in and tell me if you agree with this, which is that if the question is asked, how does one not feel guilty for caring for himself? Because some people that even outside the special needs community, they're just such a nurturer. They want to make sure that, people come over for dinner or even just a family dinner, everybody's eating. They've made the food. They're making sure that everyone eats, and they'll eat last, and everything. I would think, and you guys let me know again if I'm right, if you take the mentality of a person on a plane, you're instructed to put your oxygen mask on in case of an emergency first, and then put somebody else's on. So if you if you're going to respond easier to caring for others, then tie that to the value in caring for yourself.
Absolutely. Yes. Brian, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
No, you go. I'm trying to figure out how many. There were like 4 questions in that one. So
yes. So
I'm kidding. Go ahead, Jessica.
From 7 to 4. 7 to 4. That's progress.
I give you such a hard time, Sean. I love it.
What I would say about the guilt is that I call it false guilt, because guilt is a signpost that you did something wrong. Why have we believed the message that if we do something outside of taking care of the family that brings us joy or a sense of calm, that it's not okay? Who sold us that message that it's not okay? Who sold us the message that we have to martyr ourselves and burn ourselves out for the sake of our families? I think it's just parenting myths. It's parenting myths. And if you're taking care of yourself because you need to be sustained for the long haul of caregiving, I mean, Ryan will be our responsibility his whole life. He will never be independent. He may get to live separately. That would be nice if he was in a nice setup where he felt like he was with peers and independent. That may not happen. I don't know. So I cannot go down. So I'm going to make it a priority to take care of my marriage, my mental health, my emotional health, my spiritual health, my physical health, because I can't afford to go down.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Well, I think that we're gonna and we're similar to what you had gone through. We're putting our website together, and Sean Hall, our partner and producer, he's been instrumental in helping us kick that off. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna align resources. So we had Jim and Kathy got on in one of our early shows, and they're working on an initiative where adults with special needs, there's a whole facility, a living work together facility that they're preparing in Los Angeles. And so, those are the things that we want to align efforts and get people to understand what other folks are doing in this space, because there's so much overlap in what we all need. So
absolutely,
it's something that we're working on now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's
and
great.
By the way, speaking of Sean Hall, he happened to put there in the chat that the professor who coined the compassion fatigue is Charles Figley.
Oh, yes, Charles Figley. I knew it was Charles. I couldn't. Yes, Charles Figley. Exactly.
Yeah.
May I share, if there are moms listening, if they want to join the community, how they do that?
Please do. Please.
Yes, that was the next thing I was going to say. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. You simply just go to our website, wearebravetogether.com, and there will be a little pop-up, and you can join the community. We don't have yet a separate Facebook group for dads. That eventually might happen if needed, if the need is there, if they're requesting it. But we just launched our very first dad support group. We have this wonderful life coach who is leading that. And the first group was yesterday. The next one will be in March. So that will also be on the website. So hopefully, and you guys should be a part of that. We'd love to have you.
We'd be honored.
That'd be awesome.
That would be really great. So I'll connect you with John, who's leading the group for the dads.
And what's the best places to find you or follow you other than your website?
My next question: Instagram, or how do people find you?
Social.
Yeah. Instagram at We Are Brave Together. Mm-hmm. We have a podcast on iTunes and Spotify called Brave Together. We have an Instagram for that called at Brave Together Pod. So you can see what our episodes are all about, and links are there.
Great.
We also have a private Facebook group for We Are Brave Together Moms.
Good.
So once you join, if you check the question that you want to be a part of that private, it's actually secret Facebook group, then we add you in, and it's a great place to share stories of triumph, or vent about your day, or seek resources, or ask questions. Mm-hmm. And something that we say, it's a core value of We Are Brave Together, is let us share and not compare. There's no comparison. We're not comparing pain. We're not comparing diagnoses or how hard your daily life is versus my daily life. Every mother counts. Every parent counts. Every child counts. It matters. Whatever your story is, whether you feel like it's light or too heavy, it matters. And our Facebook group and our events are a place where you can say what you want to say, and no one's going to pounce on you. We understand. We get it. All we give is love and support and empowerment. There's no judgment.
Excellent. And then those are the best venues for people to be able to reach out to you if they wanted to reach you directly as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We are at that time. Brian, you want to do your thing?
Fantastic. Yeah, this is Jessica. First of all, we're always blown away by how fast an hour goes by. Like, we're already, oh my gosh, we're already at the end of, I feel like that's so much more to talk about. So that just shows it how amazing this conversation was. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your family with us, and what you're doing on a going forward basis, and the fact that you're committed to the things that we often end our show with, a conversation around time, and especially now, almost more than any other time. People sharing empathy and love is critical to our future success
Yes.
and our future togetherness. And so thank you for being a part of the show. So grateful to you and Sean. I'm grateful to you, partner, and to Sean Hall for putting this together, and all the folks who listen to us and tune in on a regular basis. Robert Moorhead, I think Susanna was on today. I think my daughter Jordan was on today. So for everybody who, if I didn't mention you, it's not because I'm leaving you up, because I can't see you all, but thank you all for being a part of what we're doing. And Sean, I'll let you sign us off here.
Yes, I will do that. I did have one quick question for Jessica, and it is one. Jessica, tell us if you can. We ask guests of guests as we close up from time to time. Give us one example of a thought or belief, I should say, that you had and held dearly and believed with all that you might, that you now feel differently about.
That's a good question. Wow. I have like 10 seconds to answer that. That I feel differently.
It's okay.
Gosh, you got me on the spot.
That's okay.
Well, I think before I had Ryan, the phrase that I don't like now, that I used to think made sense, but after Ryan, it didn't make sense, is God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And people like to say that, and they mean well, but after I had Ryan, after I lost my mom and my beloved mother-in-law, yes, we are handed things that are more than we can handle, but we have to find a way to draw strength and peace and resilience and grit and grace despite that.
That is fantastic.
Beautiful.
Thank you so very much.
Beautiful.
Thank you again for being here. I'm thankful for what we do, and that it allows people like you to for us to cross paths with you. And
thank you.
And what you do in the name of your organization is what we believe. We are brave together.
Amazing.
Doesn't mean that we're not afraid, because bravery requires fear just as much as it does action. And so I want to thank everyone that's been tuning in, everyone that tuned in here today, everyone that follows us. You can find us on We Are Just Two Dads at Instagram, everyone that follows us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts as well, and our listeners on WSTX in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I want to thank my mom, Jan, were it not for her, I would not be here, quite literally. And were it not for my wife, Laura, I wouldn't be who I get to even try to make an attempt to be. So my gratitude is immeasurable. And for everyone listening, just remember that there's somebody someplace that needs to know that you care. Somebody someplace needs to know that they matter. Somebody someplace needs to know that they are loved. And as we like to say, if you're listening to us, if you're watching us, we love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.